All right, so we're live now. Something just happened, and something huge just happened in Beijing. As China's property market collapses, Xi Jinping chooses to openly defy the US and double down on Russia. An internal power storm and a new global crisis are at the very same time. Welcome to China Decoded. I am Aric Chen, Senior News Anchor, Editor-in-Chief of Global News and Newsweek NTD, and a mentor to an international policy think tank. We've got two major stories to break down for you today, and they paint a really fascinating picture of what's happening both inside China and on the world stage. First, we're going to talk about a very unusual, high stakes political meeting that just wrapped up in Beijing. It tells us a lot about who really holds the power in China right now. And second, at the very same time, China made a huge move in its relationship with Russia, right in the face of new warnings from the US. This could change the game for everyone. So let's dive right in. Okay, on July 14th and 15th, the Chinese Communist Party held what they called a Central Urban Work Conference in Beijing. Now, I know what you are thinking. A meeting about cities? How exciting can that be? Well, this was a huge deal. First of all, this kind of meeting is incredibly rare. The party has only held one four times before in its entire history, and the guest list was a who's who of China's elite. All seven of the top leaders, the Politburo Standing Committee, were there. All the major regional bosses, heads of central government departments, and even top military officials were called in. Think about that. Why would the military need to be at a meeting about housing and city planning? This is where we get the first big political signal. This meeting was all about Xi Jinping sending a message. And that message is, I am in charge of everything. Normally, a meeting about the economy or housing would be run by the premier, Li Qiang. He's supposed to be the guy managing the day-to-day economy. But that's not what happened. Xi Jinping gave the main speech and then left. Li Qiang was left, just give a little summary at the end. He was basically just an assistant, there to take notes and carry out orders. Compare that to the last time they had this meeting 10 years ago. The premier at time, Li Keqiang, gave his own full major speech, and this time, totally different. It shows that Li Qiang's role has been seriously downgraded. And another thing people noticed, one of the top military generals, Vice Chairman He Weidong, was a no-show. He's been missing for a while now, and his absence from a meeting like this important pretty much confirms the rumors that he's in some serious political trouble. So you have Xi Jinping flexing his muscles, showing everyone from the economic planners to the generals that he's the one and only boss. It seems like a direct response to rumors that his power might have been weakening. He's staging this massive event to show the world, and more importantly, his rivals at home, that he's still firmly in control. Maybe he just won a behind the scenes power struggle, and this is his victory lap. Now, all of this political drama is happening while China's economy is facing a massive crisis, especially the housing market. Just as the meeting started, new numbers came out, and they are bad, really bad. New home prices in June saw their biggest drop in 8 months. Prices for existing homes fell even faster. And investments in real estate for the first half of the year had the biggest drop since the pandemic began. China's property market in the middle of the collapse. In many places, house prices have fallen by 50%. Think about what that means. It means that for millions of Chinese people, the loan on their apartment is now worth more than the apartment itself. They are underwater. So with this crisis going on, did Xi Jinping announce a bold new plan to save the market? No. He gave a speech, made some general comments, but offered no concrete solutions. The whole event felt less like a government meeting to solve problems and more like a political loyalty rally. It was about strengthening the Xi core, making sure everyone is on board with his agenda, while the real life problems people are facing get pushed to the side. Okay, so that's the drama happening inside China. Now, let's look at what was happening on the world stage at the exact same time. On Monday, July 14th, President Donald Trump issued a stark warning. He said that if Russia doesn't make a peace deal with Ukraine in 50 days, the US will hit Russian goods with a 100% tariff. And he added that he has support in the Senate to put massive taxes up to 500% on any country that helps Russia. This is called secondary sanctions. So, a clear line was drawn in the sand. Then, just one day later, on Tuesday, what does Jinping do? He meets with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Beijing, and he doubles down, promising to strengthen China's support for Moscow. Why would China do this, knowing the risks from the US? Well, from Beijing's point of view, they feel like they don't have a choice. Russia is their most important major ally. If they lose Russia, or if Russia is severely weakened, China is left standing almost completely alone on the world stage. Their other so-called friends like Iran and Syria are shaky. Without Russia, Beijing becomes very isolated. But this decision comes with a huge price tag. It's going to absolutely wreck their relationship with Europe. The EU nations, who are already very wary of China's support for Russia, will now likely take a much tougher stance. And this creates a really interesting dynamic. As the US gets tougher on both Russia and China, it's actually pushing the US and Europe closer together. They are realizing they need to team up to counter Beijing. So, as US China relations get worse, US Europe relations will likely get better, and they will work together to put pressure on Beijing. We can expect to see NATO get even more involved in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific region, to send a clear message of deterrence to China. So a little while ago, on July 2nd, the South China Morning Post reported something pretty striking. They got information from sources said that when China's top diplomat Wang Yi met with Kallas, who is the EU's foreign policy chief, Wang Yi was very direct. He apparently said that Beijing cannot accept Russia losing the war, and his reasoning, if Russia falls, the US would then turn its full attention to dealing with China. Now, this is a really big deal because it clashes directly with China usually says publicly. They've always claimed they are not a party to the conflict. But this statement from Wang Yi really shows a different side of things. Basically, China is worried that once the war in Ukraine ends, the US and other Western countries will shift their focus and start putting more pressure on China. So they really don't want to see Russia lose. From their perspective, by supporting Russia, they are essentially keep the West tied up in this war. This gives China more breathing room strategically. Now, let's look at US President Donald Trump's approach. His current strategy seems to be a mix of things. On one hand, he's beefing up military aid to Ukraine, and on the other hand, he's offering Russia a dignified exit from the conflict. He's even hinted that being open to things like Ukraine, not necessarily getting Crimea back, or not joining NATO as a way to give Putin a way out. But here's where it gets interesting. China is reportedly doing everything it can to block this process. Some even suggest that China is the biggest reason this war is dragged on. To protect its own strategic interests, China doesn't want Russia and the West to make peace. Instead, it seems China wants to pull Russia closer, essentially controlling its economy and resources. If Russia does decide to end the war, China would then be left to face the strategic pressure from the US all on its own. It looks like Trump is trying to break apart the China-Russia alliance by using both carrots and sticks. Military aid for Ukraine on one side, and the threat of tariffs and the sanctions on the other. Even though China and Russia have talked about a no-limits partnership, if Russia ever realizes China's true intentions, that perhaps China is looking out for itself first and foremost, Russia might reconsider and try to mend ties with the West, moving further away from Beijing. However, if Russia chooses to keep fighting and rejects peace talks, the US will likely head it with severe economic sanctions. This would not only make Russia's economy even worse, but also force it to rely even more on China. This could turn Russia from the major global player into essentially a raw material supplier and a market for Chinese products, a kind of third-rate dependency, and that's something Russians definitely won't want to see happen. For China, it's a tricky situation too. If they are caught providing military or significant financial aid to Russia, the US would almost certainly wrap up its sanctions against Beijing. This would throw China into an even deeper economic and diplomatic mess. So, China is really in a tough spot. If they help Russia, they risk US retaliation. But if they don't help, Russia might lose the war, leading to even more international pressure directed at China. It's a high-stakes game of chess, and every move has massive consequences. What do you think about all of this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So there you have it. In one 48 hours period, we saw Xi Jinping tightening his grip on power at home while making a huge, risky bet on Russia abroad. It's a move that shows he's feeling that pressure, but it's also a move that will likely push his biggest global rivals closer together. It's a lot to watch, and I will be keeping a close eye on it for you. That's all for today on China Decoded. Thanks for watching. And staying true to our values, we've partnered with trusted top global brands like Proton, the Swiss-based provider of end-to-end encryption tools such as Proton Mail and Proton VPN. It is very well known and used every day by journalists and privacy defenders worldwide. I'm one of them. By signing up through the links below with the paid plan, you'll not only get protection for yourself, but also help the channel stay independent and focused on uncompromised content. Currently, the Proton VPN service has a limited time special offer of 64% off with my link. Don't miss it. Behind the slogans, beyond the surface. If you are interested in real situation of Chinese politics and the Chinese economy, you can click to watch other videos on my channel. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.